Alright, Roger's here. So today's video is about getting the gears to shut up. Right? How do we get everything to be quiet, right? At least so that the gears don't sound like a dying yak or like like a rabbit getting beat over with a baseball bat or something like that, right? The video is going to be kind of long. There are a bunch of things to cover, but overall, this is a big collection of techniques that will help you measure and make sure that everything ends up clean. And I didn't include this before because some of these techniques are ones that either I was working on or that I've adopted that kind of help you to get clean gear noise every time. Whereas before, you might actually do everything seemingly right, but you still end up with real screechy gears, and that's really, really frustrating. Like I said, I went on kind of a quest to figure out how to make everything clean. So, I'm going to run y'all down the list real quick of topics that I'm going to cover. And then we'll get to it. Okay? So, first I'm going to talk about your needed tools. Then about what do you think? Gosh, that's terrible. The modifications that you need to perform onto the gearbox shell and the grip. And then I'm going to talk about matching the pinion to the bevel. And then I'm going to talk about the pinion angle. And then I will talk about finding and properly setting the proper pinion depth. Okay. And then the last little bits kind of come in real quick. I don't say much about them because I've said it in other places, but then you'll go to the proper bevel height. Okay. And then I kind of reference one of my other videos for shim tightness. So that's how tight the shims are on each side, right? How much play there is in the gear. And then I'll do a little part about checking your work, and most particularly like with marking compounds and things like that. So here's the list of what we're going to cover, right? There's a lot of ground to cover. Like I said, the video is going to be kind of long. I mean, this is just the intro and it's already kind of long. But anyway, hopefully you stick around for it because, it all plays a big big role, right? I was going to say big difference, but, anyway, you get the idea. All right. Okay, guys, so you're going to need a few tools to do this. The whole procedure. In all, it's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 steps, right? And each of the things you see out in the front here has something to do with that. Now, obviously, you need the screwdrivers to be able to get into everything, right? That much is intuitive. The next thing is you're gonna need a drill bit that's of some decent size, right? You can see it here compared to even like a Sharpie or something like that, so that you can drill a hole in a specific spot that'll allow you to see in. Same thing with a grinding bit. Use a Dremel, use a carbide bit like this. Do whatever you have or whatever you're comfortable with working with. You're gonna need a straight edge of some type, whether it's one of these box cutter X-Acto crazy whatever, I don't know, whatever it is, but either that or a razor or something, preferably something you don't mind the edge getting kind of wrecked on. That's what this razor is for me. It's already in bad shape. You'll need a Sharpie so that you can make some scribing marks with these tools here. And then you need some measuring tools. And I'm always going to advocate using standard inches dial calipers and indicators because they are so easy to use. And a lot of people say that you have to shim by feel, and if you can shim by feel and get it correct every single time, get it where you want it every single time, that's great. I like using these because there's no take one shim out there, one shim in there, one there, here, whatever, all that. No, you just measure it once and then, maybe you adjust it one more time after that and then you're done, right? Whereas if you do it by feel, it could take you a very long time to make it happen. Anyway, okay, so we'll move on now. Okay, so you need to make some modifications, and now is probably a good time to do it. So I told you to get a hold of some type of grinding bit and some type of drill bit, right? The drill bit will be used to put a hole. Basically, you need to find, it's a little tricky when you're first doing it, but you need to find about where the edge of the bevel is going to be, right? And it needs to be a big enough hole to where you can see the edge of the bevel and what will end up being, with the motor all the way in, the outer edge of the pinion. So use a decent sized drill bit there. And you're not going to sacrifice structural integrity because there's nothing here that needs to be strengthened. Okay, ideally the stress should be up here, not down here. The next thing is you're going to grind a hole out the bottom of your box right here, right? Well, I guess it's the edge, but anyway, you get the point. And that's so that you can look in and grab the teeth of your bevel, okay? Now, once you get those two things done correctly, you need to make sure that, and you can see it right here where I've done it, you need to file the edges of your your motor grip so that they don't grab the bearings, okay? And you can use a feeler gauge, which is basically a calibrated sheet of metal to a certain thickness. You can use that to make sure that it doesn't touch. Basically, you'd install the grip and then slide it through on, like, in between the bearing and the grip to make sure that they don't touch each other. Or you can use a few sheets of paper, just slide them through, and if they go through without any resistance, then okay, I have enough room here to where the bearings aren't touching the grip. Next, take your body and install your gearbox shell. Doesn't have to be a completed gearbox. I go ahead and install it into the body. Now you're supposed to get your pins in, right? And this one too. I'm not going to do it because there's not much of a point, right? You get the idea. Just do as I say, not as I do, right? Okay, so once you get the shell into the body, notice the body can move, but the gearbox and the grip are not. You need to have space in between the two, The grip is not supposed to be an extension of the body. It's an extension of the gearbox. Okay, if you don't make that room, if you don't file your grip around any edge that it needs to be filed, okay, if you don't file it to where it has that play, then what's going to happen is when you bolt it in, it's going to be stopped. Like the gearbox isn't going anywhere because it has the pins in, right? So your grip's going to be stopped, pulled away from the gearbox because the body stopped it from going in any further. So then, guess what? Your motor measurements, like the depth and everything, are going to be incorrect. Okay, so make sure that you get, make sure that you do those modifications so that to the gearbox so you can see and everything, and to the grip so that it doesn't influence anything in the wrong direction. Okay. So I suppose it sort of goes without saying that your meshing needs to be clean, right? The actual fitment of the pinion to the bevel. You can see here that these seem to fit pretty well. That the pinion teeth fit pretty far into the recesses of the bevel teeth. Now, another thing that you need to make sure of is that, say, once you kind of pinch them together like this, make sure they're at the right angle with each other. And then just gently roll it around. Now, does the pinion, does it just roll around real smoothly? Is it real happy? Like, it'll roll from one tooth to the next without much resistance at all. Like this one, I can hardly even feel any bumping at all, or any like grinding, or any rough spots, anything like that. It just rolls real smoothly, almost like it's on a bearing. So if the shape of the pinion teeth, or even of the bevel teeth, is such that when you roll this around and it, like, it'll grab then goes easy, then grabs and goes easy, then grabs and goes easy, then like when it's rough like that, you're almost guaranteed to get noise. So a lot of people use a general rule of thumb that you match your gear set with your pinion. So SHS, SHS, right? And do things that way. Now, I find that it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I'm not even sure who made this pinion, but it seems to fit pretty well with this OEM gear. Of course, I don't know who made the OEM gear, and it would be my luck that they'd end up being the same company, but the point's illustrated anyway. So make sure that your pinion and your bevel gear match and like each other, and that it rotates smoothly, so that when it's loaded up, it'll actually rotate smoothly when it's having to overcome all that stress. And make sure, right, that it goes deep enough into the recesses to where you actually have enough of the pinion grabbing onto enough of the bevel to where you won't like break off the top edge of the bevel pieces or teeth, or the pinion teeth. So definitely the next thing to talk about, and the next thing that needs to be checked before anything else, is your pinion angle, because it does not matter how tall, how high up your bevel is. It doesn't matter how deep in your pinion is. It doesn't, how tight the shims are. None of that matters if your pinion angle is off. It's going to be loud no matter what. You're going to get bad meshing. Things will get worn quickly. All of that kind of stuff. And that'll all get exaggerated on a system that is having to overcome a lot of load. So say like in an M150 system, or M170 or a 210, something like that. If your pinion angle's off, it's just gonna eat itself alive. So how do you check it? Well, God help me, and I'm sorry, bud, because I always mispronounce your name, but Meki, I don't know. I'm going to put a link to his tool in the description and his video. But he made a tool that fits into the bearing pieces and has an extension that comes out the bottom that your motor grip connects to. Or rather, you bolt your motor grip on, and you take out this piece here, the center piece, and this plastic piece connects from your bearing centers all the way out to here, and it tells you whether this is aligned with this. Now, ideally, the pinion of the motor should be straight down the shaft of the motor, which should be pretty much straight with the center cap, which is what this presses on, the end bell, if you will. And if that's the case, if you know if this is straight with this, and the pinion is therefore straight with your bearing piece here, then it should be so that your pinion teeth will be straight with the bevel teeth. Now, sometimes you get bevels that are off their, they were cast or created off their axis, and that's something to check. I mean, you know, you can, when you put shims in it, you can spin it and just watch one edge of it. Does it wobble that way, like to and fro? If that's the case, then it might be that the bevel is made improperly. And I really suggest, as you go through, that you spin the bevel around to make sure that it's correct at all areas of it. On like north, south, east, and west, if you understand what I mean. Anyway, so I'm gonna let him talk more about how that's done and his tool and everything, because that was his creation. Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. Okay, so let's talk about the next part of the equation. Pinion depth. How far should it be into the equation, right? So now that you have your holes that you can see things, you're going to take a Sharpie and etch everything, put in enough paint on each side of the hole to where you can start making some scribe lines. Put your bevel inside the gearbox, bolt it together, okay, and take your motor with the pinion you're going to use, motor you're going to use, all that kind of stuff. Put it in and find the outer edge of the pinion. Okay, you're going to make two measurements. Pinion in all the way in, so the outer edge of the pinion all the way in, and then the outer edge of the bevel. Right? So put the pinion all the way in up against the bevel gear, and then scribe where the edge of the pinion is. Then you're going to take that off. Okay, and now you're going to look in there and find the outer edge of the bevel and scratch across there. Okay? After completing that, you're going to take your measuring tool and measure the distance between the two. Okay, so let's say you find it's 70 thousandths or something. Okay, whatever it was. Now, here is the trick. You take your motor grip. Okay, you're going to install it on with the wiring and everything, with 4 bolts, so that you actually get the proper, like, how it's going to be when it's operating. Okay, and you're going to put your heat sink onto the end. Okay, now you're probably thinking, well, I can't measure that, right? How am I supposed to see the hole? So that you don't need the hole. All right, what you need is to take, and this is largely a feel thing, guys. Zoom out here so I have a little more room. This is very much largely a feel thing, and it's something you're just gonna have to get some practice with. And no, it's not dead precise, but it's close enough. You're gonna find with, you know, twist this all the way in, right? Put your pinion up against the bevel. Measure the distance from, you know, and choose the same spot each time when you measure this, okay, guys? Lean your tool backwards and forwards to make sure that the edge of it here sits flush with the actual screw. You're going to tip it backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forward. Find that sweet spot, okay? And then measure it. Let's say you get past one out to 185 thousandths there. Okay? So if you measured and it was, say, 60 thousandths, that your pinion, the distance between the two, you know, in your measurements, then you need to remove, or rather back off, your screw 60 thousandths. So this is going to close up some. So now it's going to be 125, from 185 to 125 thousandths. And then you're going to back your screw off until it sits flush. Okay? And then you'll know that screw, I mean, and this is, it's going to be a little bit of like in about kind of close to, not quite there, I don't know. It's a feel thing, right? But get it as close as possible. And the nice thing about this is it's going to measure it. If you get really, if you get good with it, you're going to measure pretty close. Now, here's the thing. When you take off your motor plate, don't mess with the screw. All right, if anything, mark an edge so you know where it ended up in case it gets bumped. Take off the plate, you know, the screws on the outside here, and take your grip off. And now you can adjust, you can start working on your bevel height. But if you don't know the proper pinion depth, then it becomes very difficult to set the bevel height if you're just guessing, right, where it's going to end up. Because if you notice, since it's an angled gear, let me zoom in a little bit here. Since it's an angled gear, the closer it moves in, the tighter it gets. The further it moves out, the looser it gets, okay? The distance spreads. So the depth needs to be set before you start messing with bevel height, okay? So once you get your pinion depth, then you can move on to the next part of it. And, you know, really that a lot of times I end up doing the bevel height by feel. Just the back side of it here, okay? Now, once you find out what that's supposed to be, then, you know, you can reference the other video to do it. But, you know, I'll bolt the case together and use the dial indicator, move the gear, see how much plays in it. And I use the indicator to set the shim tightness, okay? But the bevel height, a lot of times it's a feel thing. I haven't quite figured out numbers for that yet. And frankly, it's kind of hard to do. But it's important when you do it that you spin the gear around and find, you know, at 12, 6, 3 and 9 of the gear, you find out how much space there is and tap the gear back and forward, you know, that kind of thing. And I believe I talked about it in the other video. So it'd be gear shimming part 2, shimming the bevel. You can kind of flip through that video to see how I talk about it. But it's really, really important to make sure that you do the modifications to your parts, that you get your pinion to bevel matching right, that you get your pinion angle right, okay, and that you get your pinion depth measured and right. Then the rest of it, you know, at that point, if you want to do everything else by feel, go for it. That's fine. But those are the methods that I use to clean up gear noise and everything. At least, you know, for measuring and everything. I'm going to talk very briefly now about the method that I use to check wear patterns and everything. Okay, so there's one last part of this video, and it'll go pretty quick. It's checking to make sure that everything ended up okay, that you measured properly and everything, and really that you have the pinion in the right spot, that its angle is correct, that the tightness is correct, that the matching of the shapes is correct. This last test will give you pretty much everything, because it's, well, really it's probably the most practical part of the whole equation, and that's take a marker or some kind of paint or something like that, and paint up enough teeth, you know, a good section of the bevel, and paint up a good, you know, maybe even all the pinion, right, or a good section of it. Throw your box together and run it, okay, with a good spring in it and everything, like the one you're going to use. The paint or the marker should not get in the way. I mean, if you're using paint, be careful that you don't use too thick of a paint. I guess I should be fair enough to say, but you know, if you use, say, marker or the machinist bluing, that's, you know, that's another way to do it. But go ahead and do that so that when you run it, right, you can disassemble it and check your wear patterns, okay? And you'll notice that, say, if the pinion is too high, then, you know, only the very edge of the teeth will be worn. Only the very edge of this teeth will be worn, right? If you got your pinion depth wrong, you're going to see that it's going to be too high in. There's going to be no wear on the outer edge, but all that stuff's going to be worn away on the inner edge. If it's too far out, it'll tell you that too, you know. So there are all kinds of aids, like visual aids out there for checking wear patterns and everything, but that's a way that you can do it to where you can get a good idea of how your setup actually performs, how it ended up for real. Anyway, so good luck, guys. Thanks for watching the video. I hope this is helpful, and I hope that you guys find success with it. If not, or if you're having trouble with it, leave a comment, let me know, you know, or if you disagree with what I'm saying, if you have a better way of doing it, then I'd be happy to hear it. You know, even compare the two. I mean, we'll see. Anyway, good luck, guys. Enjoy. We'll catch you later in the next video.